you contribute towards Calstrs 8% of your salary. And that's fixed in statute. And as David said, that number cannot change unless you are provided an increased benefit in return for that increased contribution. It's part of the contract that you have with the state for providing educational services to the state of California. For the new members, though, it's a different rule. The new members have a rule that says, Calstrs will determine what the ongoing cost, what's known as the normal cost of the plan, and you will pay half of that cost. As it happens, for the time being, the normal cost, this ongoing cost of the new benefit structure, is equal to about 16%, a little bit short of 16% of pay, so half of it is 8%. So the new members are going to be paying 8%, as well as you are, but what's different is their number can change if the normal cost goes up or down relative to where it is now. Your number can't unless a bill is passed and there's something provided to you in return. So that's one difference that will affect new members. Here's the other difference that I'm getting into. The formula, as I said, that you get is how many years did you work, how old were you when you retired, and what was your final salary? And then what you get that how old you are when you work. For every year of your age, at time of retirement, you get a certain percentage of your final compensation for every year you work. For an existing member, if you retire at age 60, you'll get a benefit equal to 2% of your final compensation for every year you work. So if you work for 30 years, your benefit will be 60% of your final compensation. If you work 25 years, it'll be 50%. If you work 40 years, it'll be 80%. That's for an existing member. That's what's known as, because it's a 2% at age 60, that's why it's referred to as the 2% at 60 formula. If you retire after age 60, that percentage will go up, and the maximum percentage is 2.4 at 63. If you retire before age 60, that percentage goes down, and if you retire as early as age 50, which you can do if you have 30 years of service, but trust me, almost nobody does that, because you'd have to start when you were 20, then your benefit, that percentage is 1.1, and then everything in between that percentage continues to go up until it hits 2.4 at age 63. But for the new members, what the benefit that they got at age, what you would have gotten at age 60, they won't get until age 62. So their benefit is a 2% at age 62 formula. So if they taught 30 years and retired at 62, they would get 60% of their final salary, but if they taught at age 60, it would be less than that. So that's what it means. That's what 2% at 60 means. It means that we will pay you a benefit at age 60 equal to 2% of your final compensation for every full year that you work. The other changes that were made is all of you, as I said, if you had 30 years of service, you can retire as early as age 50. If you have 5 years of service, you can retire at age 55 or thereafter. For new members, no matter how many years of service they've got, they can't retire before age 55. So there's a higher minimum number of years. As I said, the age factor that is currently the highest age factor, which is 2.4 for all of you, occurs at age 63. For all of them, occurs at age 65. The other significant change is for any of you who retire with at least 30 years of service, we will add to that age factor an additional 0.2%. But the total of that number of what your age factor is plus what we refer to as the career factor can't exceed 2.4. So for example, let's say that you retired at age 60 with 30 years of service. The age factor at age 60 is 2%. We will add 0.2 to that, so your actual final formula will be 2.2 years of service, 2.2% of your final comp for every year of service. For new members, that career factor goes away. So their formula is a simpler formula in the sense of there aren't these career factors and all these other things, but it is a lower formula for sure. In fact, this is a comparison of what the current and the new age factors look like. So current is what all of you get right now. So you can see right now at age 60, you would have a benefit of 2% of your final compensation for a year of service. They don't get that till age 62. At age 55, it's 1.4 for you. They don't get that till age 57. Across the board, for all intents and purposes, the benefit that you get, they would not get it unless they retired 2 years later. So, everybody clear on that? Good, all right, so you don't even need a workshop. So, the other changes for the new members only. There is a compensation cap above which they don't get any retirement benefit for anything above that cap. In the case of Calstrs, because we are not in Social Security, that cap this year is $136,440. That number will change each year with the California Consumer Price Index. What that means is that if somebody's making $150,000, which is primarily administrators, but a few community college faculty, they won't pay contributions on anything above $136,000, and it won't count towards the retirement in their final compensation. So that's it. That's all they're getting. They can get, their employer can give them a 403B or some other defined contribution plan, but there are restrictions on that, but they can't get any kind of defined benefit for anything above that cap. So higher paid, so this basically limits how much their benefit could be. And quite honestly, this will probably eliminate the equivalent of what's known as the $100,000 club. Because between the reduced formula and this cap, it's very unlikely that anybody can get a benefit that's equivalent to what's $100,000 now. The other nice thing about this, from our perspective, is that the issues around spiking we find are primarily people who have much more control over their compensation and get paid a lot of money. But if there's a cap of $136,000, to the extent that their salary that they're monkeying around with exceeds that amount, it's not going to affect their benefit. So the opportunities for people to spike their pensions in the future for new members is going to be substantially less than what it was in the past. The other changes is that the compensation, this again exists for new members only, the compensation that counts towards retirement will be more restricted. So the only thing that they will get is benefits that are paid on a regular recurring basis that is on their salary schedule. And it specifically excludes things like housing allowances, auto allowances, cash in lieu payments, and bonuses. So none of that will count anymore for future members. It does still count for the existing members, but for the future members it doesn't. The reason why, by the way, why you see such a distinction between the current members and the future members is because you have a contractual right to the benefits that you were offered at any point that you work. And that's true for all Calstrs members, and that's a contract that is enforceable in court, and we do enforce it in court if we need to. The one nice thing about what was done last year is, apart from the fact that the changes relative to the Calstrs formula weren't that dramatic, but they also did very little that was dubious of dubious legality. Is that they did very little that encroached on the contractual rights, and the big issues didn't encroach on the contractual rights because it only applied to future members who have no contractual rights at this point. Yeah. Final compensation is for the existing member. What we do is if you've got 25 years or less or more, I'm sorry, then we take your highest your highest full-time salary rate for a school year over a 12-month period. If you have less than 25 years, it's your highest 3 consecutive school years. It's your average annual compensation over 3 consecutive school years. So if you had less than 25 years of service and you earned $55,000 one year, $60,000 one year, and $65,000 one year, the average of that is $60,000, and that will be your final compensation. Okay, it's pretty simple. And the 1 year, it's your single year. Now, for new members, it's going to be 3-year final compensation for everybody. So again, this is sort of something that's helpful on the spiking issue, because if somebody's going to monkey around with their compensation to try to improve their benefit, they're going to have to do it for 3 years in order to get the full value of that. So again, that's something that was valuable in terms of a spiking thing. And quite honestly, California was like the last remaining state to have, and Calstrs was one of the last remaining plans to have 1-year final compensation. So now everybody, for new members, will have 3-year final compensation. Again, it's 3 consecutive years, and it's your highest 3 consecutive years. It doesn't have to be your last 3 consecutive years. And the other thing is, and this is true for existing members as well, is that if you were furloughed, and so that full-time salary rate was reduced because of a furlough, it does not have to necessarily be consecutive school years if you were furloughed somewhere in that time period because of a reduction in school aid. In that situation, if you were, let's say, for example, that this year and 2 years before and 3 years before were your highest 3 years, when you're ready to retire, just tell us those are the 3 years you want us to use, and that's what we'll use. So, you will not be, you don't necessarily have to be affected by the furlough. It sort of depends on your own circumstances. The last change that was made to existing members, which applies to very few people in the future, well, will apply to nobody in the future, but even a few people now get it, is the federal government, in their infinite wisdom, said, apart from all the other restrictions we have, there's a certain dollar limit that you cannot pay a benefit more than a certain amount of money, which in our case is about $175,000 a year for people who are 62 years old. But you can pay it, if your formula says you're supposed to get more money than that, you can pay them that difference, but do it through a different formula, which is what we've been doing. We have about 300 people in this entire state who get this benefit. That goes away for future members, but nobody would have qualified for this benefit because of all the other changes that were made for the new members. So again, that's not a big consequence. So now let's talk about what does affect you. Again, which is mostly not nearly as dramatic. There was a bill passed, another bill passed last year that changed how much money you can make after retirement in working in the school system and have it not affect your benefit. It used to be about $31,000. Now it's about $40,000 because we measure it on a different basis. And that number will be a little bit smaller next fiscal year, but not that much smaller. It'll be about $40,000. So basically, this year and next year, if you're retired, you can earn about $40,000 after retirement, and working in the schools, whether as an employee of the school, as a contractor for the school, or if you're working for another company who's got a contract with the school, and you're providing a service that would normally be provided by a school teacher or a superintendent or a principal or anything that would normally be covered by us, then you can earn $40,000 and you'll get a full benefit. If you're earning above $40,000, we're going to reduce your benefit $1 for every dollar you earn above that. Okay, that's a higher number than it used to be, but it's still a number. So that was the change that was made last year. There is one very narrow exemption from that's going to be around for the next couple of years. Doesn't apply probably to anyone here because it's for school districts that are going financially underwater or academically underwater, and they need to hire somebody to sort of take it over. So it's a trustee or a special advisor. In the last 5 years, we've had 5 people qualify for this. So don't hold your breath that this is going to mean anything to you. And also, it wouldn't apply if somebody received a retirement incentive or get an inducement to retire and stuff like that. So the other change that was made is that up until now, there was in addition to the general earnings limit, that if you retired under the age of 60, that if you came back to work in the first 6 months of your retirement, anything that you earned in any of that service that I just talked about, we will reduce your benefit dollar for dollar, starting with the first dollar. That's now been changed to apply to anybody regardless of how old they are in the first 180 days of your retirement. So what this means is there's nothing to say you can't come back to work, but in the first 180 days, you're effectively working for free. You'll get paid by your school district, and then we're going to reduce your benefit $1 for every dollar that you got paid by your school district. So you better make a lot more money from your school district than what you're getting a benefit from us, or you're not getting anything out of that. So I just want to make sure that's clear. There are no exemptions from that, except for unless there's a critical vacancy that the school board jumps through a whole lot of hoops to go through. We don't really anticipate that will apply very often. That rule applies to anybody who retires beginning this year or afterwards. So if somebody retired before the end of this year, then this new limit doesn't apply, but otherwise this will apply to everybody who's working now. Yeah? A lot behind it is sort of what David was talking about. There was a substantial, the two issues that the legislature was most concerned about dealing with public pensions was people who were spiking and people who retired but came back to work. And so they wanted to create basically the philosophy is a retirement benefit is there to pay people who aren't working. If you're working, don't retire. If you're retired, don't work. But there's a recognition that to some degree, people want to work to some degree, so they said, okay, in the case of Calstrs, you can work and earn $40,000, which is about half of what the average person was working when they retired. But if you're gonna work, don't retire. And quite honestly, from our standpoint, we understand why it's appealing for people to get a full benefit and a full salary. But if you thought about it in the long run, you would have been better off not retiring. In the short run, you would have gotten less money because you weren't getting an income and a retirement benefit. But if you deferred your retirement while you continued to work, you would have been older, might have gotten a salary increase, and you certainly would have worked more service credit. So you'd get more money down the road by just not retiring. So they said, well, you can retire if you want to, but for the first 6 months, you got to have a real break in service, and then you can get back to work, and we'll put a limit on how much money you can earn. Yeah. Yes, unless you don't mind the fact that we'll reduce your benefit.
Right.
Yes. Nothing, like I said, I mean, it's sort of but it's interesting, people are under the impression that it actually prohibits you from working. Let me make it clear. It does not prohibit you from working,
Just don't give me
but it's basically not prohibiting you from volunteering, is basically what you're doing. Okay, so a lot of times the school districts might think, so there's something that you need to be aware of, because the school district might want to bring you back. They don't care. To them, your help that they don't have to pay contributions for, you're cheaper to them than an active teacher. It's up to you to be aware of the fact that it's going to cost you a benefit. So please be aware of that when the time comes for you to retire. Yeah. For the time being, yes, but we will close that loophole. What we found was that a lot of people, it's interesting. This whole experience has been very interesting. And this isn't meant to be a shot at anybody. People have spent more time trying to figure out how to get around the rules than they just had to accept the fact that this is what they're trying to do and just deal with it. Again, what I said, if you don't want to work, then retire. If you want to work, work. We get that. But all I'm saying is that the rule is that's what a retirement benefit is for. It's to replace the income that people no longer get because they're no longer working. So things that people were doing was giving them health benefits, putting money into a 403B, doing a whole lot of things. That will probably all change very soon. And we strongly encourage people when you're starting out to put money away as quickly as you can, even if it's a small amount. It can make a huge difference in the long run. So that's why there are other tools available to you. Yeah. No, actually, a classified job, actually, law prohibits you from returning into a classified position at all unless you're a teacher's aide. Otherwise, there's no limit. It's actually prohibited by law. You can't do it at all. Now, it's not clear what happens if you do, other than the fact you're breaking the law, but it's against the law to do that. But you can work in the state. You can work in the state job or a county job or anything like that. You just can't work in a school district in classified service. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, it's 180 calendar days. All right, so it's basically 6 months, but it's actually 180 days. So it's not 180 school days. It's basically the equivalent of a semester. Okay, so the other big change, which has already gone into effect, is that there used to be a thing called airtime, or non-qualified service. It was a mechanism by which you could put your money into Calstrs and buy additional service credit that wasn't associated with any actual work. Well, it was called airtime because we basically pulled the time out of thin air. You paid the entire cost yourself. It wasn't subsidized in any particular way. It fully covered the cost, assuming we earned all the money that we assumed we were going to earn, but you got a nice benefit out of it. Well, they repealed the ability to do that for anybody who tried to buy it after last year. So if you didn't submit a form to us to actually apply to buy that service by 5 o'clock on December 31st, you can't do it anymore. So that's gone. Doesn't mean that you can't, if you took a refund, you can always redeposit that. If you worked out of state, you can buy that service credit. If you're on maternity, paternity leave, you can buy that. Any of the other leave that you can currently buy service credit for, that's still around. That's still there. So if any of that applies to you, strongly encourage you to look to see what it would cost, because the older you are, the more that costs for you to buy. So that's another way to supplement your retirement income, is by buying more service credit It's just that this particular source of that is now gone. The other change that applies to existing members as well as new members is if any of you should happen to commit a felony in the performance of your job, then you will forfeit the benefits that you earned after you committed the felony. In the case of a teacher, it explicitly says that if it's a felony with respect to a student for who you have responsibility, even if it's not in the performance of your job, that will count. So, for most cases, it's things like if somebody embezzles money from the school district or something like that, that's a felony. In the case of a teacher, if you commit some felony of some inappropriate behavior with a student, even if it is not related to your job, like something happens outside of the classroom, it's still going to be affected by this. So you will get if you commit the felony, let's say in 2010, and you get convicted of it, then any benefit you accrued after that date in 2010, you're not getting a retirement benefit from it. We'll give you back the money you contributed to us, no interest, and that's it. You'll get the benefit you earned before you committed the felony, but not after you committed the felony. If that conviction should be overturned, you can give us back the money that we gave you back, and then you'll get that service credit restored. Okay, so watch it when you commit felonies. Yes? Well, nothing happened with unused sick leave. I mean, unused sick leave is if at the time you retire, you have unused sick leave because you didn't use it all up, we will convert that to service credit. So if you've got 175 days of unused sick leave and you have a 175-day contract, you'll get a full year of service credit for it. It's again, if you have unused sick leave at the time you retire, you'll get service credit for that. And the way you figure out how much money you'll get, how much service credit you'll get for it, is looking at how much unused sick leave you have at the time you retire, and divide that by the number of contract days, the base days in your contract. So if you have 175 days of unused sick leave, 175-day contract, that's a year of service credit. If you got 1,750 days of sick leave, God knows how you get that, you get 10 years of service credit. There's no limit to how much service credit you get. Okay? The only difference is that if you accrue service credit because your school district is generous and gives you more than 1 day of sick leave per pay period, then your school district will pay us for some of that sick leave because it's in excess of 1 day per pay period. But it doesn't cost you anything. It's already paid for. They're paying for it. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your calculations. When you go on our calculator and it asks you to plug in a number, it's going to want to know how many days of sick leave do you think you're going to have when you retire and what's your contract, and we'll add that to it. That did not change in the bill. That's still there. That was a common misconception people had, that unused sick leave was going away, and that's not the case. Okay? Yeah. If your sick leave is in terms of hours, it's divided by 6 to get the number of days. It's presumed to be a 6-hour day. Yeah, it's a 6-hour day. Yes. Without regard to reality, it's a 6-hour day. That's what the law says. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit better than it sounds. I mean, that's why, depending upon your own circumstance around health care, you don't necessarily need 100% because you're not paying into Medicare, you're not paying union dues, you're not paying contributions to us. You may not be going out to eat as much, you may not be driving to work anymore, you may have a different wardrobe, but on the other hand, you may want to travel and do other things. So it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily as bad as it sounds, but it's not a bad benefit, but there's no way that 53%, unless you've got a lot of other money socked away, is going to be enough to maintain that standard of living. But yes, there will be things that will offset that. Yeah, right. Yeah. Yes, the law says it's divided by 6. So like I said, it's not with regard to any individual circumstance, it's just divided by 6. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about funding. As David said, when we had discussions with the legislature around pension reform, what we kept saying is, our benefits are fine. The important thing about the adequacy about our benefit structure, there's two big data points. Number one was the fact that on average replaces a little over 50% of your final salary. Nobody can suggest that's excessive. You're not going to get rich on a Calstrs benefit. You know, and that's after about 25 years of service, that's what people are getting in retirement. The other thing is that the contributions that you pay and the employer pays and the state pays is more than enough to cover the cost of the benefit on an ongoing basis, assuming that we earn the investment returns that we assume. The problem is that, you know, in this last decade, we didn't earn because of a dot-com bust that we got some recovery from, but then the Great Recession, where we lost, you know, everybody lost double digits. You know, we had double-digit negative returns, and we just couldn't get out from under that. But the benefits itself are well funded. It's just this, because of the bad investment returns, we have this unfunded liability is what the problem is. So there's nothing wrong with the benefit structure. It's just this gigantic financial anomaly that occurred in the last decade. So, although